Last time, if you remember, the question that we asked, the guiding question, was why positive psychology? And I mentioned 3 reasons why we need it as an independent field, as opposed to just being, well, let's do some studies on happiness, let's do some studies on relationships, as it has always been done. The reason why we need a positive psychology is to shift the pendulum from the 21-to-1 ratio that we have today. For every 1 study on depression or anxiety, we have 21 studies on, for 1 study on happiness or well-being, we have 21 studies on depression and anxiety. And we want to shift that pendulum slightly. And I mentioned 3 reasons why we want to shift this pendulum, despite the fact that there are rising levels of depression around the world, that anxiety has become an epidemic globally. On college campuses in the United States, China, Australia, UK. Despite that fact, I argued that we need to shift that pendulum and do more quote-unquote positive research. Or in other words, research that focuses on what works. And the reason is, the first reason that we gave, and we're just finishing up, is because the questions that we ask, whether it's the research questions that we ask, or the questions that we ask of ourselves or of our partners, matter. And if our only questions, or primarily our questions, are what is not working, what is the problem, why are so many kids failing as a result of their circumstances, if we only ask these questions, we will literally miss an important part of reality. Just like you missed the children on the bus in the exercise. Most of you did. And if we also ask the positive question, then suddenly new possibilities, new quests open up. Just like they did for the researchers when they started to ask no longer why do so many individuals fail, but started to ask what do some individuals do and succeed? Why do some individuals succeed despite the unfavorable circumstances? And then we had the story of Marva Collins, who exemplified so many of the themes that we'll talk about throughout the course. What Marva Collins did was help her students shift from the passive victim, you're a victim of your circumstances, of your upbringing, neighborhood, country, whatever it is, from a passive victim to an active agent. Yes, it's difficult, it's tough, it's unfair, however, it's your responsibility. No one is coming. It's up to you to make that difference in your life. And she made a difference to thousands of people's lives and continues to do so. In other words, if we look at the case of the Chicago school system where Marva Collins was teaching, the conventional, traditional question was, if you remember, how can we keep these students in school for as long as possible? How can we keep them in school beyond the age of 10 or 12 so that they don't join street gangs, so that they're not hurt by drugs or crime? How can we keep them safe in school? An important question to ask. However, not enough. Marva Collins comes along and reframes the question. And her question becomes, how can we cultivate the seed of greatness in our students? And that, once again, made all the difference, because she saw the seed of greatness in each student. She saw the strength, the virtues in each single student. A seed, a strength, a virtue, a competence that other teachers did not see because they did not ask this question. Because they asked, metaphorically speaking, how many geometrical shapes do you see on the screen? And they completely miss the children on the bus. They completely miss the seed of greatness. And when we don't see the seed of greatness, when we don't water it and shed light on it, it withers and dies, which is unfortunately the fate of most human potential. Wherever we go, that is the fate of most human potential, interpersonally in relationships, in most organizations, in most universities, in most individuals. Questions make a difference, which is why it is also important to ask the positive psychology question, which is the salutogenic question. What is the source of health? What is the source of success? What is the source of well-being? So that's the first reason. The second reason, before I go to the second reason, if Marva Collins was here today, here is the question that she would be asking us. How can we cultivate the seed of greatness in ourselves and families, in our communities and organizations, in our nation, and in our world? And when we ask this question, this very important question, suddenly we see possibilities that we didn't see before. Second reason for having positive psychology as a field of study and focusing on what works and focusing on researching happiness and relationships and well-being is because happiness does not spontaneously arise when we take unhappiness away. Now, happiness and unhappiness, or happiness and neurosis and psychosis and depression, are interconnected, of course. It's very difficult to be happy if we're experiencing severe depression or anxiety. So they're certainly interconnected. However, just getting rid of the anxiety or the depression will not in and of itself make us happy, which is the conventional wisdom today, which is the conventional wisdom of many psychologists, practicing psychologists. Well, let's just get rid of that depression and then everything will be fine. It won't. The analogy to explain this is, think about the ability to enjoy food, a gourmet meal. Now, if we have indigestion, it is very difficult to enjoy food. So yes, we first need to get rid of the indigestion. However, that in and of itself does not guarantee us that we enjoy food. We have to go out and eat the gourmet food to enjoy it. Just getting rid of indigestion is not sufficient. We need the next step. Many ways you can look at most of our experiences, psychological affective experiences, on a continuum, where some of them fall below the zero, the negative experiences or the painful experiences, and the positive or the pleasurable experiences between the zero and the positive. Neurosis, anger, anxiety, depression, psychosis, to name a few. On the negative side, the painful side, well-being, satisfaction, joy, excitement, happiness. On the other side, which is the side that positive psychology studies. Again, getting rid of the negative does not guarantee us the positive, which is why already in the 1840s, David Henry Thoreau wrote that most men lead lives of quiet desperation, where it's okay, there's nothing really wrong, but it's just somewhere there. In the words of Pink Floyd, people are comfortably numb. Comfortably numb. Not enough. How can we get beyond that comfortably numb? How can we get beyond that quiet, okay, desperation, to excitement, to joy, to happiness? And in order to do that, we need to cultivate these traits. Once again, they don't spontaneously emerge once the painful experiences go away. And that is why we need a positive psychology. Positive psychology essentially focuses on the health model, salutogenesis. What is the source of health? Physical, psychological, emotional. How do we get people to flourish intellectually, emotionally, psychologically, interpersonally, intrapersonally? How do we get them to thrive beyond just getting rid of what's not working in their lives? And under that model, we see two extremes on many levels. Here is the first level. Do we focus on weaknesses, which is what the disease model say, let's get rid of weaknesses, or do we focus on strengths? Well, when you ask people this question, and this was done by the Gallup organization, a poll, global poll, whether it's in Japan, China, United States, or Europe, most people think that it's more important to focus on their weaknesses if they are to succeed. Big mistake. The people who focus primarily, not only, remember the also, who shift the pendulum, who focus more on their strengths, are not only happier, they're also in the long run more successful. It applies to leadership as well. Positive psychology says let's focus also on our strengths, at least as much. In an organization, as well as on the individual level, are we focused mostly on overcoming deficiencies or building the competencies, what we're good at, and getting better at it? What our natural inclination, individually or organizationally, do we focus on that and then build on that? Again, tied to success as well as well-being, if we're more toward the positive side. How do we live our lives? Running away from painful experiences or actively seeking pleasure? Running away from unhappiness or adhering to the declaration and pursuing happiness? Now, that may look quite similar. For example, someone may be working 80 hours a week, running away from something, running away from issues at home, running away from dealing with intrapersonal issues. And that may look exactly the same as a person who works 80 hours a week and who is extremely passionate about what she does. May look the same, but from the inside they feel very different. One is the disease model. Let's run away from what's not working. The other is the health model. Let's pursue my passions, what I love to do. With the disease model, the optimum level is the zero. Let's just be okay. Let's just not hurt. And again, that's important to get rid of hurt. It's important to get rid of depression. But what the health model is saying, that's not enough. Let's go beyond that. Let's go to the excitement, to the fun. Because the ideal is not just a tensionless state, it is the creative tension. And we'll talk about it and we'll read about it when we do flow. Flow is the state where we're excited, where we're engaged in what we're doing, where it's much more than being comfortably numb. In fact, it's being a little bit uncomfortable. It's being outside of our comfort zone. It's being in our stretch zone. Not the panic zone where it hurts, the stretch zone where there is excitement, where there is some nervousness, there is also growth there. So what do you want? Where do you want to go? What do you want to pursue? Do you want to run away from pleasure? Run away from pain? Do you want to run away from unhappiness? Or do you want to pursue happiness and pleasure? Do you want to focus primarily on your deficiencies, your weaknesses, or your strengths? What is the optimum? What is the ideal? Is there a glass ceiling, the zero? Or can it go on and on? More excitement, more enjoyment, more passion. Now, there's something threatening about the health model because there is really no limit and there are less prescriptions there, certainly today, than in the disease model. Positive psychology, the field of health psychology, is in its infancy. There's much more research, much more advice out there on how to get rid of depression than on how do I pursue my strengths. But fortunately, and again, this is why positive psychology as a network of scholars applying themselves to these ideas and ideals is so important. Because today, as you'll see throughout the semester, there are so many more tools that we can apply to our lives to go beyond the zero. That's not all.